The Congressional hearing room fell silent as Representative Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium, holding up a document that no one expected to see. Former Small Business Administration head Linda McMahon, sitting at the witness table with a composed expression, suddenly went pale. The document in Crockett's hand wasn't just any paper. It contained evidence that would turn this routine oversight hearing into a moment that would reverberate through Washington for weeks to come. "Mrs. McMahon," Crockett said, her voice steady yet powerful in the hushed chamber, "you came here today prepared to question my qualifications and understanding of business. But this document shows exactly who understood and who didn't." What happened in the next 3 minutes didn't just silence McMahon. It left her visibly shaken, fighting back tears as cameras captured every moment of this unexpected reversal. This wasn't just a congressional exchange. It was a moment of truth that no one saw coming. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful political moments that the mainstream media won't show you. Representative Jasmine Crockett had risen quickly in political circles. Since her election to Congress, the Texas Democrat, a former civil rights attorney with a law degree from the University of Houston, had developed a reputation for her sharp questioning and meticulous preparation. At 43, Crockett was relatively new to Washington politics, but had already established herself as someone who wouldn't be underestimated. Linda McMahon carried a different kind of authority into the hearing room that day. The 75-year-old former CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, and head of the Small Business Administration under President Trump brought decades of business experience to the table. As co-founder of the professional wrestling empire alongside her husband, Vince McMahon, she had transformed a regional promotion into a billion-dollar global entertainment company before entering public service. Their paths had rarely crossed until this oversight hearing on small business grant programs. The committee was investigating allegations that certain programs had disproportionately benefited larger corporations during McMahon's tenure at the SBA, potentially at the expense of minority-owned businesses in districts like Crockett's. The hearing had been contentious from the start. McMahon, who now headed the America First Policy Institute, had arrived well prepared with statistics and anecdotes defending her record. Several Republican committee members had praised McMahon's business acumen and leadership, setting the stage for what appeared to be a standard partisan hearing. That changed when, early in the questioning, McMahon responded to Crockett's initial inquiry about grant distributions with unexpected condescension. "Congresswoman," McMahon had said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had built a business empire. "With all due respect, running a small legal practice is not the same as understanding how federal business programs actually work. In the real world, perhaps if you had more business experience, you would understand why these decisions were made." The dismissive tone silenced the room momentarily. Committee members glanced at each other, sensing the shift in atmosphere. McMahon continued, elaborating on her point while citing her decades of experience building WWE from a small regional promotion to a global corporation. "I built a company that created thousands of jobs," McMahon added, leaning into the microphone. "I've signed the front of paychecks, not just the back. So, when we're discussing business program effectiveness, I think that perspective matters." The implicit suggestion that Crockett lacked the expertise to even question McMahon's decisions hung in the air. Republicans on the committee nodded approvingly. Democrats shifted uncomfortably. McMahon sat back, the slight smile on her face suggesting she believed she had effectively put the younger Congresswoman in her place. But what McMahon didn't know was that Crockett had spent weeks preparing for this hearing, diving deep into records that few had bothered to examine, and she had discovered something that was about to change everything about this confrontation. "Thank you for that perspective, Mrs. McMahon," Crockett began, her voice measured as she shuffled papers. At the podium, "Before I continue my questions about the grant programs, I'd like to clarify something about my background since you brought it up." McMahon nodded slightly, still looking confident. "You suggested I lack business experience," Crockett continued. "I want to note for the record that before becoming an attorney, I worked as a business consultant for 5 years, helping small businesses in underserved communities access capital. I've helped over 200 small businesses develop business plans and secure funding." McMahon's expression remained unchanged, still projecting confidence. "But my experience isn't really what matters here today," Crockett said, shifting gears. "What matters is how the SBA, under your leadership, distributed resources meant for truly small businesses." Crockett pulled out a binder and opened it deliberately. "Mrs. McMahon, are you familiar with the Premier Business Grant Program your administration created in 2018? "Of course," McMahon replied. "We created that program to stimulate innovation in emerging sectors. It was quite successful." Crockett nodded. "And the program guidelines required businesses to have fewer than 50 employees and annual revenue under $5 million to qualify, correct?" "That's right," McMahon confirmed. "We wanted to focus on true small businesses with growth potential." "Have here," Crockett said, lifting a document, "the complete list of grant recipients during your tenure. According to your own SBA records, 43% of these grants went to businesses that didn't meet those criteria." A slight frown crossed McMahon's face. "I'm not sure where you're getting those numbers, Congresswoman. Our compliance team verified all applicants. I'm getting these numbers from the SBA's own internal audit," Crockett replied, her voice gaining strength. "An audit that was completed but never made public." She held up another document. "This audit, which my office obtained through a Freedom of Information request, shows that nearly half the recipients exceeded either the employee count or revenue limits. Some exceeded both." McMahon shifted in her seat. "There were always exceptions made for businesses in underserved sectors or regions. That was within our discretion." "I understand discretion, Mrs. McMahon," Crockett responded, "but I'm curious about some specific recipients." She pulled out another page. "Titanium Technologies received $1.2 million through this program in 2019. At the time, they had 215 employees and annual revenue of $28 million. That's well beyond your limits." McMahon's confident demeanor began to fade. "There were factors beyond the basic criteria. What's particularly interesting about Titanium Technologies," Crockett continued, not allowing the interruption, "is that their CEO, Robert Williamson, was a major donor to political campaigns you supported. He also served on the advisory board of your family foundation." A murmur went through the hearing room. McMahon's expression tightened. "That had nothing to do with their selection," McMahon said firmly. "They were chosen based on their innovative approach to manufacturing." Crockett nodded. "Perhaps, but they weren't the only one." She flipped to another page. Nova Healthcare Solutions received $800,000 despite having 178 employees. Their executive chairman previously served as a vice president at WWE. The room grew tenser. McMahon's face had lost its confident glow, replaced by a defensive expression. "Congresswoman, you're implying impropriety where there was none," McMahon said, her voice rising slightly. These businesses qualified under expanded criteria. The selection process was rigorous and fair. I am not implying anything, Mrs. McMahon. I'm stating facts from your SBA's own documents, Crockett replied calmly. She turned to her aide, who handed her another folder. But since you mentioned the selection process, let's discuss that. Crockett opened the new folder. The SBA's standard procedure requires 3 independent reviewers for each application. Yet, for these particular grants, the ones that went to businesses with connections to you or your associates, there was only one reviewer, Thomas Kelly. McMahon's composure began to visibly crack. Mr. Kelly was a senior advisor with extensive experience. Mr. Kelly was your former personal assistant at WWE before you brought him to the SBA. Crockett interjected, her voice still calm, but now carrying an undeniable authority. He had no prior experience in grant management or small business policy. The hearing room was completely silent now. Committee members leaned forward, sensing they were witnessing something significant. While these connected businesses received millions, Crockett continued, businesses in my district, genuine small businesses within your stated criteria, had their applications rejected at a rate of 96%. Many of these were my businesses that aligned perfectly with the program's stated goals. Crockett pulled out one final document, the one that would prove most damaging. Mrs. McMahon, I have here an email exchange between you and Mr. Kelly from March 2019. In it, you provide him with a list of priority applications ahead of the official review process. Every business on this list eventually received funding, despite many not meeting the program criteria. She held up the printed email. In your own words, you wrote, these applications should be moved to the top of the pile. We need some wins with this group. Can you explain what you meant by wins with this group? McMahon's face had gone pale. The confidence that had radiated from her earlier had evaporated completely. That was taken out of context, McMahon stammered. We were trying to ensure diverse representation in the program. Diverse representation. Crockett repeated. Mrs. McMahon, not a single business on this priority list was minority-owned, but 70% of them had connections to political donors or personal associates. McMahon began to respond, but Crockett wasn't finished. What's most troubling isn't just the preferential treatment, she said. It's that while these connected businesses received fast-tracked approvals, small businesses owned by minorities and women were being told there wasn't enough funding. My district lost potential jobs and economic development because resources meant for true small businesses were diverted to your associates, companies. McMahon's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. The hearing room remained silent, the weight of the evidence hanging in the air. I didn't come here today to embarrass you, Mrs. McMahon, Crockett said, her tone shifting from prosecutorial to something more measured. I came seeking accountability for the small business owners in my district who played by the rules and still lost out. She looked directly at McMahon. You questioned my business experience and suggested I couldn't understand these programs. But I understand very clearly what happened here. The question is whether you're willing to acknowledge it. Linda McMahon stared at the documents in front of Crockett, her composure now completely shattered. The hearing room remained silent, the only sound the occasional click of cameras capturing. This unexpected moment, the former SBA administrator, who had entered the room projecting strength and authority, now looked cornered and vulnerable. I need to review those documents before responding further, McMahon finally said, her voice noticeably shaking. The committee chairman, sensing the gravity of the moment, nodded. We'll take a 10-minute recess to allow the witness to review the evidence presented. As staffers scrambled and committee members huddled in whispered conversations, the cameras remained fixed on McMahon. She sat alone at the witness table, flipping through copies of the emails and audit reports Crockett's team had provided. With each page, her expression grew more distressed. When the hearing resumed, the transformation was complete. Gone was the confident executive who had attempted to lecture Crockett on business realities. In her place sat a visibly shaken woman, struggling to maintain composure. Mrs. McMahon, having reviewed the documents, do you wish to revise your earlier statements? The chairman asked. McMahon slowly leaned toward the microphone. I want to clarify that while I was aware of the general operations of the grant program, many of the day-to-day decisions were delegated to my staff, including the decision to prioritize applications from your associates. Crockett asked. I may have made suggestions based on businesses I was familiar with, McMahon admitted, her voice barely audible. I believed they were qualified, despite not meeting the published criteria. Crockett pressed. McMahon's eyes glistened with moisture. The criteria were guidelines, not absolute requirements. We had discretion that seems to have consistently benefited those with connections to you, Crockett noted, while harming businesses in communities like mine. McMahon took a deep breath, clearly struggling with what to say next. A tear slipped down her cheek, which she quickly wiped away, but not before the cameras captured the moment. I never intended, that is, the program was meant to help small businesses, McMahon said, her voice breaking. If mistakes were made in the selection process, that was not my intention. Crockett nodded, then did something unexpected. Rather than press her advantage against the now emotional McMahon, she shifted her tone. Mrs. McMahon, I believe you when you say that wasn't your intention, Crockett said. Most people don't set out to create unfair systems, but impact matters more than intention. The small business owners in my district who were denied funding didn't care about intentions. They cared about results. McMahon nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue provided by a staff member. What matters now, Crockett continued, is what we do going forward. Today, I'm introducing legislation to reform how these business grants are administered. The Small Business Equity Act would require truly independent review panels, transparent selection criteria, and regular audits with public findings. She looked directly at McMahon. Mrs. McMahon, given what we've discussed today, would you be willing to publicly support these reforms? The room held its breath. McMahon, still visibly emotional but seeming to regain some composure, considered the question. Yes, she finally said, her voice steadier. I would support those reforms. Whatever mistakes happened during my tenure, making the process more transparent would benefit everyone. The admission and commitment, captured live on C-SPAN and quickly spreading across social media, represented a complete reversal from how the hearing had begun. McMahon, who had arrived intending to defend her legacy and dismiss Crockett, was now publicly acknowledging flaws in her administration and endorsing her critics' solutions. Thank you for that commitment, Crockett said, her voice conveying genuine appreciation rather than triumph. That kind of accountability is what the American people deserve. As Crockett concluded her questioning, the hearing room buzzed with energy. Journalists rushed to file stories, and staffers hurriedly made calls. What had begun as a routine oversight hearing had transformed into a defining moment for both women, humbling one while elevating the other. The images told the story in stark, terms, McMahon wiping tears from her eyes, a study in regret and vulnerability. Crockett standing tall at the podium, documents in hand, the picture of prepared, principled leadership, the confrontation between Representative Jasmine Crockett and Linda McMahon didn't end in the hearing room. Within hours, video clips of the exchange were circulating widely across social media platforms, news networks, and political websites. The moment when McMahon's composure broke became the defining image, a powerful visual representation of accountability. In action, major news outlets framed the story with headlines like McMahon confronted with evidence of favoritism in small business programs, and Crockett's meticulous preparation leads to emotional hearing breakdown. Political analysts from across the spectrum weighed in on the significance of the exchange. What we witnessed wasn't just good political theater, noted veteran political correspondent Eleanor Simmons on CNN. It was a masterclass in oversight. Freshman representative doing exactly what congressional oversight is supposed to do, holding powerful figures accountable with facts, not just rhetoric. Even conservative commentators acknowledged the effectiveness of Crockett's approach. Whatever your politics, you have to respect the preparation, said analyst James Harmon on Fox News. Crockett didn't rely on gotcha questions or political grandstanding. She brought receipts. For Linda McMahon, the hearing marked a significant blow to her carefully cultivated image as a savvy business leader and effective public servant. The America First Policy Institute, where McMahon served as chairwoman, issued a brief statement the following day. Mrs. McMahon acknowledges that aspects of the SBA grant process during her tenure could have been more transparent. She remains proud of the thousands of small businesses that were helped during her leadership, but the damage to her reputation was substantial. Former associates began distancing themselves, and invitations to speak at business forums and political events suddenly dried up. The email evidence that Crockett had presented raised questions about other decisions made during McMahon's tenure, prompting calls for broader investigations. 3 weeks after the hearing, McMahon announced she would be stepping down from her position at the America First Policy Institute to focus on family and personal interests. The resignation was widely interpreted as a direct result of the hearing fallout. For Jasmine Crockett, the confrontation became a defining moment in her young political career. What made her approach particularly effective, and what commentators kept highlighting, was how she had combined thoroughness with restraint. Crockett could have gone for the jugular when McMahon was at her most vulnerable, noted political strategist David Chen. Instead, she pivoted to solutions that showed not just political skill but genuine leadership. The Small Business Equity Act that Crockett introduced during the hearing gained immediate bipartisan support. Even representatives who had defended McMahon at the beginning of the hearing found it difficult to oppose reforms designed to make grant processes more transparent and fair. 6 weeks after the hearing, the bill passed the House with an overwhelming majority. When it moved to the Senate, it gained the surprise endorsement of several business organizations that typically aligned with conservative causes. This isn't about politics, said the president of the National Federation of Independent Business in a statement supporting the bill. It's about ensuring that genuine small businesses have a fair shot at these programs, regardless of their connections. The bill's passage and signing into law represented a remarkable legislative achievement for a freshman representative. Crockett's district saw immediate benefits as the reformed grant programs began prioritizing truly small businesses, particularly in underserved communities. 1 year after the hearing, a follow-up study found that minority-owned businesses in Crockett's district had received over $15 million in grants under the reformed programs, more than 5 times what they had received in the previous 5 years combined. Beyond the policy impacts, the confrontation became a case study in effective congressional oversight. Law schools and public policy programs incorporated video of the exchange into their curricula, highlighting how thorough research and strategic questioning could create meaningful accountability for ordinary Americans. The Crockett-McMahon exchange resonated because it represented something increasingly rare in political discourse, a moment where facts actually changed the conversation. In an era often defined by entrenched positions and tribal loyalties, seeing someone acknowledge error based on clear evidence offered a glimpse of how democratic institutions were supposed to function. The most powerful moment wasn't when McMahon cried, observed political scientist Dr. Rebecca Wang. It was when she said yes to supporting reforms. That's the purpose of oversight, not humiliation, but course correction. Linda McMahon eventually returned to private life, taking a much lower public profile than she had maintained for decades. In a rare interview a year after the hearing, she reflected, "That experience changed me. It's humbling to confront mistakes so publicly, but sometimes that kind of accountability is necessary for growth, personally and institutionally." Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, became known as one of the most effective members of Congress, renowned for her methodical preparation and focus on tangible results rather than political theater. When asked about the McMahon hearing in various interviews, she consistently emphasized the same point. That day wasn't about winning a political argument. It was about getting results for small business owners who had been overlooked. That's why we're here, not to score points, but to make the system work better for the people who need it. The iconic image from that day, McMahon wiping away tears as Crockett stood firm with evidence in hand, became shorthand for a rare political moment when preparation met opportunity, when facts overcame connections, and when accountability actually worked as intended. As for the small business owners in Crockett's district and beyond, they experienced something even more meaningful. A government that had finally started working for them rather than for the well-connected. New businesses opened, jobs were created, and communities began to thrive. All because one representative had done her homework and had the courage to use it. If you found this story of accountability and justice inspiring, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful political moments that show democracy at work. Leave a comment below telling us what political confrontation you'd like us to cover next.